Okay, everybody, it's 5:30. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Edinburgh Economic Development Corporation. Could we get a roll call, please? Here?
Present.
Dan Diaz will be coming soon. Sabrina Walker Hernandez. Raul Resendes. Eddie Garza.
Present.
We have quorum, ma'am.
All right, we've got a quorum. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, public notice, certification of public notice, Rodell?
The meeting was posted on January 9th, 2023 at 5:05 p.m. in accordance with statute.
All right, thank you. And disclosure of conflict of interest, Omar?
Yes, ma'am. Under state law, a conflict of interest exists if a board member or certain members of that person's family has a qualifying financial interest in an agenda item. If there is a conflict of interest, the member can't participate or vote on the item. Are there any conflicts to disclose?
No.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
great. All right, public comments. Did anybody sign up for public comment? No? All right, great. Then let's go to number 5, regular agenda items. Item A, discuss and consider approval of a catering sponsorship for the City of Edinburgh State of the City event. And so, Rodell, you want to tell us? I think it's going to be a really exciting State of the City event this year.
Well, what they're trying to do for the State of the City address this year is they're going to do the Taste of Edinburgh type of catering. So selected restaurants are going to be coming out and actually putting on their best dishes, their appetizers and hors d'oeuvres, and the public will be able to sample those. It is going to be open to the public. There isn't tables, but there are going to be buffet tables and that type of thing. And it'll be basically open to the public. The city has asked us to help with the catering costs. Originally, they had asked us for a $5,000 sponsorship. Just recently, after I had already done the packet, they asked if we could increase the budget to $7,500 on the high side. We have the budget for it, but I mean, that was something that I said, well, it's up to the board. But it's definitely a way of marketing for us. It's a way for us to get in front of not just the citizens of Edinburgh, but the entire Rio Grande Valley and talk about all the exciting things that are happening and have happened in the last year here in Edinburgh. So,
What is the date for it?
March 30th, I believe.
And will there be an opportunity, I guess, for the city to, well, I'm sure they'll acknowledge sponsors, but also maybe give a rundown of some of the things that have happened with the EEDC?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's March 9th.
March 9th.
But yes, economic development is obviously one of the highlights. The ECN is actually starting to work on a video, and they have asked for our input, and we are going to be featured as some of the activities that have been happening in Edinburgh over the last year.
Okay, and this is over at the conference center?
Yes.
Okay.
What is that, the costs associated with catering? If restaurants are bringing in their items, what other catering?
We're having to pay for that. I mean, they are bringing them in, but we're paying for that. So there is a cost to that for the food. They're not pitching in for free, correct?
Although they are getting advertisement.
Yeah, it'd be nice to consider in the future you know, not necessarily be select whoever wants to participate, and then they bring their selections of food, and you know, that's part of their marketing
as a way to promote themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the 7,500 though, that's the high end, you said.
Yeah, not to exceed 7,500 is what city management asked me to bring forth to you all.
What's I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask you, do you know what we've contributed in the past for an event like this? Or for
Last year was 5,000.
5,000.
Yeah.
What's the parameters of the city, or who selects these folks?
That's happening at the city manager level.
And just my concern of, there's generally the big boys who get to participate in things like this. like an opportunity to see what the list is, to see the local small business restaurants can also be part of this?
Every one of the restaurants that are going to be participating are locally owned. That's what they wanted to make sure that it's locally owned restaurants.
So last year, we contributed to the city, to this event, 5,000? That's what we gave?
I don't know if it was last year, because it may not have been held last year. I'm sorry, I may have
Yeah.
misspoke.
I don't
But it
know.
was
Yeah.
in 2019 was the last time that they had the State of the City address,
Okay.
and it was 5,000 at that time.
And that was more of a sit-down during lunch kind of
Correct.
event at the Bert Ogden Arena, if I recall.
That's right, yeah.
And they're expecting a pretty good crowd this year.
Do they have I'm sure they have a limit on how many they can admit, so do you happen to know what they're aiming for?
Jonah's correcting me, I'm sorry, and saying it was 4 years ago was the last time that the
Wow.
EDC had it.
Before
Yeah.
COVID.
And would their
Yeah.
increase in ask be because they're not charging? Like at previous events, you had to sponsor a table, and that would cover some of the cost. But now they're not doing that, they're opening it to the public, so now they have to generate that difference.
And we
cost.
would generally sponsor a table if it was happening anyway.
Yeah, we
So
would.
I don't think there's too much of a difference in what we would
That
pay
makes sense.
to sponsor a table.
And
Okay.
it's probably
kind of
gone up, the
cooperating with
cost anyway of food and everything has gone up. But I'm just curious, if they are going to seek other sponsorships, I imagine they will, even if it's open to the public. A lot of times they'll have like a list of sponsors, and then they have different entities within the city that
Yeah.
Like,
sponsor.
is the chamber part of that? Are they participating?
I'm not sure.
That'd be a good question to ask. They should, obviously.
Well, but yeah, they should. But I'm saying, I know the chamber gets money from the city, the library gets money from the city, the museum gets money from the city. I mean, it's kind of the same money, you know what I mean? We get money from the city, but they used to get a lot of outside sponsors as well. So you'd have, DHR sponsor, UTRGV sponsor. You have a lot of different entities within the city that are sponsors typically. I don't know if they're doing that this year, but that's neither here nor there, I guess, in a sense. It's whether we are willing to do 7,500.
Yep, from what I'm being told right now is that the mayor said there will be no sponsorships, and the chamber has not contributed, but the city has allocated funds for the State of the City address. This is to supplement the city's budget. And Dan Diaz will be responsible for making the presentation that really focuses on our economic development activities.
Okay.
I think it would show good faith for us to go ahead and participate in this.
So if we do approve, we're approving up to 7,500.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the recommendation.
Okay, so are you making a motion, Ronnie,
Yeah, I make
for
a motion to approve, yes.
up to
Up to
7,500?
7,500.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Or raise your right hand. Okay, that's been approved. And then, as it gets closer, Rodell, just give us some more information so that we can know what we need to do. Okay, discuss and consider approval of a strategic alliance memorandum between the United States Small Business Administration and the EEDC.
So from time to time, the SBA sends out information that is very useful to our small business community. And what they have asked us to do, and we've been working with them to disseminate some of that information, is we're formalizing that agreement basically to allow them to give us information and then us to spread that information out to our small business community. And it's basically a marketing effort on both our ends, their end and ours, to show that we're both promoting small business development and helping small businesses tap into the resources that SBA has. So as they send out information, if we need speakers for certain events, they can provide them. And if they want us to speak at certain events that are focusing on small business development, we can participate as well. There will be links between us and their website and our website so that people can tap into those resources as well. This just kind of formalizes that agreement, something that we practice every day anyway.
Yeah.
And so what I'm asking is for you all to go ahead and approve this memorandum. It doesn't affect the budget at all. This is just a information sharing memorandum. And other than that, if there's any expenses to anything, if we put on a seminar or something, a workshop or something like that, and then that's something that's on us, but SBA would love to help us set those kind of things up in the future. I have been working on trying to set up some franchisee workshops and those type of things, and I want to make sure that SBA is one of the players in that type of event. So in the future, that's going to be something that's going to be very helpful.
Yeah, and I know like our Small Business Development Center at the university is part of the SBA. They do a lot of free one-on-one advisement and a lot of seminars and other things, many times at the chamber, but nothing preventing us from also tapping into those. And so this is just putting into writing what the agreement has been to provide services and
Right.
spread the word. Okay.
Good faith agreement, I guess.
Yeah.
Can we get a motion to approve item B?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye or raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that motion passes. Item C, discussion and possible action on the agreement between Coldwell Banker, Commercial RGV, and Edinburgh Economic Development Corporation for real estate services.
So Coldwell Banker responded to an RFQ back in 2021 requesting certain real estate services be performed on behalf of the city and the EDC. They were the group selected by the EDC and the city. And in your packet is real estate services that are outlined that they did and they have been providing for over that one-year period. This was a one-year agreement. There was no automatic renewal and no automatic termination. It was silent on that. So Daniel Galvan, who's the principal at Coldwell Banker Commercial, asked me for y'all to basically provide clarity. And so as I was reviewing the agreement, you have the pleasure of having hired a licensed real estate broker who can do all of the above services, except for the legal portion, which Omar can handle. And so although I think that Coldwell Banker is a very top-notch organization, most of these services can be performed in-house, and it makes sense to just keep doing this in-house.
Okay, because the contract's already expired, so we
It's
wouldn't
expired.
even be required to provide any notice at this point. It's just, it's a contract that is expired. If we wanted to renew it, we would need to get approval to renew it. But at this point, your recommendation is, let's not spend the money on a realtor fee when we have the services that can be performed by you
Actually, if
in-house.
a realtor brings in a deal,
They still would get their
I'm
realtor
gonna
fee.
recommend that
Yeah.
realtor gets compensated for that.
Sure.
But it's only on one side.
Yeah.
And so that encourages those realtors to bring in the deals because they know they're working with somebody who has experience also, but not gonna take their fee.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, we that was one of the things that stood up with you, with your real estate experience, so we feel pretty confident with that.
One of the things, if I may add on Coldwell Banker, and in terms of economic development, if you look at every Jersey Mike, Cold Brew, Dunkin' Donuts, I mean, I can go on and on. They're the face of them bringing those folks to the valley.
yeah.
They have the network and the contacts.
Yeah.
They know their role.
Yeah, they're excellent brokers, and we're going to continue working with them. I have good relationships with Daniel and a lot of the folks that are there. Have known them for many, many years, and we're going to continue that relationship and build it stronger if we can.
Yeah, because Daniel Galvan holds some type of special commercial license, right? That only a small number of
I believe he's
real
got a CCIM designation, and there's several people who in the valley, but not very many who have that designation.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
which is specific for commercial real estate.
So your recommendation on this one is to allow the contract, I guess it's already expired, just to,
Yeah, just to allow me to basically provide him with a 30-day notice, a formal termination, if you will. But it's already been not acted upon, and therefore it's silent. But we want to make sure that there's clarity
okay.
on both ends.
But the things that are bulleted out, that's what you do in your area, in your license. Right.
Yeah, everything that is listed in the scope of services that was in that RFQ, we can do in-house.
Okay.
We have access to CoStar. We have access to all the listing databases. We can market, and we are marketing the properties, all the city-owned properties. the EDC-owned properties. But we're also going to be marketing through a new software program platform that is going to be going directly into our website called Resimplify. Every single listing that's out there, that's a commercial listing. Resimplify makes it more of an automated thing to where we're not spending staff time actually uploading information as we would in a listing service like we do right now. It's all going to be automated, and every month and on a very continuous basis, Resimplify adds to that database. So right now, if you go into our website, you're going to see very few listings. In the future, probably by in the next 30 days, you're going to see that that's a very well-populated database.
Okay. Can we get a motion then to approve item C and as discussed?
Motion to approve?
We do need a motion? We need a motion?
Yeah, the discussion, he's just going to give a 30-day notice.
Got it.
The formal 30-day notice.
Okay.
Can we get a second?
I'll second.
All right.
I have clarity.
Okay, all in favor, say aye or raise your right hand. Oops. Okay. Motion's approved. Item D, discussion and possible action on the incentive guidelines, which that was one that Rodell sent to us as a second email with the guidelines. And these, as I understand it, this is simply a overarching set of principles. This does not, there's another document that we have in our packet that discusses specifics on what kind of a point system we want to have. But this was just the overall guidelines and principles on what we want to be able to do as an EDC and what kind of incentives that we could give.
Yeah, it's my understanding that in the past, there was some sort of guideline that Edinburgh Economic Development had. I've done a little bit of review of some of the other cities that, not just here locally, but throughout the state, and see which cities and which communities have some of these guidelines in place. And these guidelines aren't set in stone in terms of, you have to do certain things. It's exactly what it says. It's a guideline, it's a principle, and I'm going to go over them just briefly. But basically what we're trying to do is trying to make others aware of how we go about the business of doing the incentive selection and the process of actually figuring out, okay, so who gets what? And why do they do that? And why are you focusing on this particular industry and not on this other business? And so when we're talking about incentive guidelines, we have to remember that we are still governed by certain statutes that the state has created. And we are what they call a Type A corporation. And so as a Type A corporation, there are certain industries and certain jobs that we're trying to attract. And the general definition is a primary job. And a primary job is a job that essentially is in a company that brings in outside money into the local economy. So that is usually the case for manufacturing and logistics companies, even call centers. There's a list of those that is listed actually within the government code.
And on Amazing,
Sorry about
Amazing
that.
Wife, we are
I don't
now
know.
live.
It's my
We are
phone.
live into Facebook.
I clicked the button.
And so, aside from those that are listed there, just as a general rule, what you want to do is try to focus on high-paying jobs that are going to circulate the money in the local economy more than not, okay? And so there are certain jobs and certain industries that we want to try to focus on. And that's what we've been doing. As a rule, that's what we've been doing. We've been following the statute, so that's what we've been doing. These guidelines just basically put it on paper, and that's all we're doing. And then it talks about what kind of incentives we give out. And so I didn't want to focus on city and EDC because the city has a huge toolbox of economic development tools. And that's probably another workshop and about 30 more days of going back and forth to try to figure out what they want to do and what they don't want to do. So I looked at what we've done in the past and what we could be doing in the future, and I listed 9 of those things, or actually 8 and then a catch-all. And one of them is we do infrastructure improvements and reimbursement of infrastructure improvements. We've done that, we continue to do that. We do job creation grants, not specifically for all industries, but for some. We do rent subsidies. We've done reduced labor or reduced land costs on land that we own. We've done loans, and right now we're doing an interest rate buy-down program, which is the LIFT Fund. We're participating with them. We've done sales tax rebate programs before, and we're going to talk about a specific sales tax rebate program in one of the following items. We've done facade improvement grants, and we've done site improvement grants before. And then number 9 is a catch-all. Any and all programs devised to encourage growth subject to the existing statutes and/or ordinances. So we're just listing things that we've already been doing in this guideline. But that way people are aware, those who visit our website are aware of what we're able to do. Not everybody's going to go back into the local government code, chapter 501, and try to figure out what they can, whether or not they're eligible. They're just going to look at our list and say, okay, well, this might work for us. And then we tell them that we're going to enter into a performance agreement that's going to outline some of the responsibilities that they have and some of our responsibilities as well. And then what I've listed was, and this is subject to y'all's approval, but what I listed was my ideas on what we should be doing in terms of the eligibility of some of the applicants. The language in these guidelines is broad enough to where, you know, we mention every deal is going to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. So this doesn't tie us down to anything, but it does give us a guideline. The applicant has to be in good standing in terms of ad valorem tax, any state taxes that are out there pertinent to them. If they're behind, then we probably don't want to be doing business with them, right? So very common sense type of stuff. They're going to have to provide us with the documentation necessary for you to make a proper decision. If they don't provide us with that documentation, then we're not going to get into the type of agreement that they might want to get into. Then the third one is really, if it's an existing business, then we can look at, you know, expansions and relocations and that type of thing. But if it's not an existing business, it's a new business that's looking at Edinburgh, they need to come to us before they close on a piece of property or before they sign an LOI or a lease agreement, because otherwise when they come to us, and we get a lot of those phone calls after the fact, we're not incentivizing them, we're rewarding them. Right. And what we want to do is we want to start getting active, proactive in incentivizing companies to come to Edinburgh. The ones who are calling us after they've already done that step have already decided to come. Right. And although that might be to others not sensitive enough, that's not our job. Our job is to bring in the companies that are on the fence or the companies that aren't even looking at us. And so that's really what we need to focus on. If they need to be here because it makes sense for them, they're going to make a profit, then by all means we're going to help them through the permitting process, the construction process, help them as a liaison for that. There's ways that we can assist them. But the financial end of it, if they've already made a decision to come, then come on board. We're going to help them, but not necessarily by writing a check to them. So the check is going to go out to the company that is on the fence or the company that hasn't decided to come yet. And that's really what I'm putting in the guidelines. Do we need to do that? We don't need to do that, but that's really what we should be doing, okay? So past performance and experience is going to count. So if these companies are brand new, we're going to have to dig in really, really deep to make sure that they're going to be around for a long time because we want them to succeed in Edinburgh, okay? We're also going to be talking about, in these guidelines, we're going after companies that are going to make a major impact on our economy. So they have to have 50, the preference is for them to have 50 or more employees, okay? And they are paying at least $15 an hour, a living wage. If they're not doing that, doesn't mean we can't help them, But that's not gonna be our priority. That's not gonna be our preference. So if I'm gonna use staff time and my time to recruit companies, I wanna recruit the companies that are gonna make the biggest impact on the community. And that's gonna be the larger employers.
That's a real big shift. I'm sorry, I was saying that was a real big shift because I don't think I've seen that since I sat on this board. It's been part-time, full-time, but not even at the quantity of 50.
I'm glad you left it open. I mean, we just, two conversations ago, we made an arrangement with the SBA. If you look at the SBA website, small business is 0 to 19 employees.
Right.
Making $12 an hour. So I hope we leave it open because I mean, we're talking, if it's gonna be 50 or more employees, it's gonna be a big organization that's gonna come in. So in essence, what we're saying, we're taking out the small business.
Well,
At 50 employees, $15 an hour.
the SBA definition of small business is 500 or less.
Yeah, but if
So-
if you dig deeper into the averages and the
Yeah.
statistics, it's 0 to 19.
Yeah, we've left it open enough to look at that. And if you really look at and we'll talk about the commercial recruitment program, it is designed for small business. It's not designed for the larger ones.
If y'all recall, we had this discussion when our assistant city manager was here, and he did a good job. We dropped that to 12, and we dropped it in terms of employees as well. So we've gone through this. Personally, I have a concern with opening doors only for 50 employees. Did you have to have 50 employees to?
Well, we're not
Yeah.
specifying it's only for them. We're saying there's a preference for them.
Yeah.
So,
Because that's been, for me, as we're in public, the number one issue that I get is you guys only cater to the larger folks. And it's true. They're right. And so, you know,
a lot of the smaller operations don't qualify under the 501 definition. They're not primary employers, a lot of them.
And I think, yeah, and I mean, I read through this and I saw a lot of may or preference or, language that was not binding, but gave us something that we're striving for. We're striving to bring, and give incentives to those who are trying to figure out where they want to locate and decide they want to choose Edinburgh, that they don't want to just come and open a fly-by-night business that could close in a couple of months, but really want to put some funds into it so that way their employees have good paying jobs and benefits and so forth. So I know it's a preference. And I agree. I mean, each one of them is going to be reviewed on its own merits, because there may be some where there's a long history with a particular company, that we know that they're successful, but they're going to start small here. And that may be something we want to look at and consider. It's just that the preference is to have a larger companies locating.
well, I think that's a given when you talk about economic
Yeah.
EDCs.
Yeah.
I think that's in our guidelines and.
But that's what
mission,
this is.
vision.
This is just the
Yeah.
guidelines.
But,
Yeah.
just,
This is a good start, I think, for what we ultimately want to do and need to do, is to have these guidelines in place. But I think there's some room to tweak some things in here and some words that we might not want to put in there and stuff, because if we have a small business looking at our website and we've got these as deadlines, they're basically going to say, you know what, I'm not going to hire 50 employees. I'm going to hire 35. So why even try?
go to McAllen,
Right.
go to
But
FAR.
there's some
go
words,
somewhere
but I
else.
think overall it's pretty good. There's just some words I think that we need to change.
We don't have to adopt this today.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is being a
So
presentation
there's
and
room
a
to
possible
tweak,
action, but we don't have to. I mean, we can just sit on it a little bit, we can, wordsmith it a little bit, and then come back later on.
Fine tune it, yeah, and do that.
Well, let's do that then. Let's, everybody, I know he sent it by a separate email. Take a look at it. We have another meeting coming up at the end of the month, I believe.
Yes.
If you can look at it and provide your suggestions prior to that meeting, perhaps we can take it up again at the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay? All right, that's item D.
So no action taken?
No action on item D at this time. Item E is now this is a separate one. This is the Industrial Speculative Building Program. it's in your packet. And this is going to be for larger type of, well, industrial buildings that are
Yeah.
looking to come
So-
and be built here.
Let me give some background. I had a company that was looking at McAllen first. They called us, they called a couple of other communities just this week, and they're looking for 400,000 square feet. That's a big box. There's only so many boxes that large throughout the valley. I can almost count them on one hand. But when you start looking at the pattern of the leads that we're getting from the state and some of the leads that we get from some of our other lead generators, you start seeing that most of the big companies that we should be going after are using 100,000 square feet or more. And when we look around, first of all, there's not enough industrial space in the valley for the demand right now. If we had more spaces, we'd bring in more companies and create more jobs. But developers are reluctant to put that kind of money up because you're talking about a $7 to $10 million building without a tenant. And that's what a speculative building is all about, is building something, spending $10 million without a tenant. How do you encourage somebody to do that? And they're really betting on the come line. What you need to do is give them an incentive. And so this program, and it's something that I thought about, and I've worked with some developers and have worked with them to try to figure out whether it's attractive to them, is just that. It minimizes the risk that that developer has for the first 2 years, which is basically from when they buy the piece of property to when they start construction and finish a building. And in all that process, in those 24 months, they're not only trying to do the construction of that building, but they're also trying to find the tenants to fit into that building, right? So what this program does is pretty simple. Typically, developers will get a construction loan from a lending institution, which is an interest-only type of loan during that construction period. So they're drawing down funds to pay off the subcontractors and the general contractors to build a building in phases. At the end of the construction, which is hopefully within less than a 2-year period, because the faster you build it, the less interest you have to pay back to the lender. And hopefully you have a tenant by then so that that tenant can start paying back the note. In that process, they're having to pay the interest on that note, and they're paying taxes also on that land. Not at full value because they haven't quite finished the building, but there are some costs, some holding costs. And that's the risk that the developers are taking, aside from the risk that is basically on the market. And so what this program does is says, you know what, we believe that there's enough demand in this market for you to build 100,000 square feet and to get it filled up within that construction period. We believe in it so much so that we're gonna pay 50% of that holding cost, of that interest carry for that 24-month period. And on top of that, we're gonna help you market that 100,000 square feet that you're building. And hopefully sometime before you get done with that building, you have tenants in there lined up and ready to go. Most of the leads that we're getting are looking for existing space. They're not wanting to wait a year and a half, 2 years to be in operation. They're looking to start operations within the next 90 to 120 days. If we don't have the space here locally, then we're missing out on those opportunities. And this is a method to help a developer mitigate that risk and help that developer say, you know what, I believe that this market's strong enough and I'm gonna go ahead and invest in this community. It doesn't cost us a dime if we can't find a developer to do it, okay? It doesn't cost us anything, other than we have something that looks proactive. If we do find a developer that's willing to put up a Class A industrial building of 100,000 square feet or more, and they're willing to work with us to find those tenants that are gonna create the jobs that are what we're looking for, then this is a way of helping them out. But it's only for 2 years.
That's the max. If
That's
they,
the max.
if they bring somebody in though, if they
If they
start
bring
to,
somebody in and say a 50,000 square foot user, within the first 6 months, okay, so the first 6 months, he's had 2 quarterly payments, we've helped him with those 2 quarterly payments. Beyond that, he's now got a tenant lined up. Once he gets that tenant lined up, then we reduce the pro rata share of our costs also. So if he's not paying interest, then we're not gonna pay interest either, you know? So as soon as he starts filling it up, our risk gets smaller and smaller. And so if he finds 100,000 square feet worth of users, then we're done. You know, if we can get that going while they're still in the design phase, then we've accomplished our task, which is to help them build and help another company come in. So, again, we believe that there's enough demand out here for more industrial space, and we believe that the spec building is not happening as fast as it could be. And so this is a way to encourage a developer to do it. It's going to be few developers who are willing to do that, but there might be somebody. And this is, again, just a tool that we have outlined that can help with that. As I said, this is something that I've done in the past. In Harlingen, there's 140,000 square feet that's being built right now because of this program.
so an industrial facility like this would be something along the lines of an Amazon warehouse or a, you know, FedEx or something along the lines. It's not your cold storage necessarily, small.
It could be cold storage, but it would have to be 100,000 square feet.
Okay.
But when you start talking about 100,000 square feet of cold storage space, now you're not talking about a $10 million building. You're talking about a much more expensive building because the cost of refrigerated space is that much more than dry storage. So that's building our tax base.
What about the, I guess, you see a lot of those rental places for, what do you call them, storage facilities?
Storage units. Mhm.
Storage units. With that wouldn't qualify, because that wouldn't be considered industrial, right?
No.
Okay.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about big boxes with, you know,
Warehouses.
ideally 35 to 50-foot bays that are designed for manufacturing companies.
Okay.
And that's really what we want to try to attract.
And the incentive will strictly be on the bank interest itself?
On
Half of the bank.
half of the, and that's subject to review by the board and subject to review by legal. They're going to have to provide us with commitment letters from the lending institution. They're going to have to show us that it's actually a market interest rate. There's a lot of little details that
I know a lot of
aren't
these
in
big
here,
yeah.
but yeah, absolutely.
A lot of these big investors, sometimes they use hard money loans where the interest rate is insanely high.
Yeah.
So there will be some type of cap.
Yeah, we can put that into the agreement, yeah. So
What's the biggest building we can build in the industrial park? That's our property.
right now, we've got the largest tract that we have available is 25 acres.
Okay, so you can build a nice
So on 25 acres, we could probably build,
But couldn't we hedge the land we already own? We own it.
Mhm.
And so that could be our hedge too,
yeah,
right?
yep,
I mean, and it's nothing out of pocket, it's the land's already there.
yep.
We're not gonna charge you, you don't have to go get a loan for the land right now because we're,
Subordinated.
Right.
you know, once you're full and once you build then we sell it and there's contracts there.
This is a
Correct.
marketing tool,
Yeah,
that's all it is. So if I can get somebody to start talking about this,
Yeah.
they may not like it because it's too strict or, you know, it's, you know, not quite what they're looking for, then we start talking about
So
options.
it can, I mean, we have property to market that without spending anything,
Right,
right?
yeah. Or when we sell that land, we use that money from the sale of the land to work on this. So, yeah, ultimately it ends up being about the same thing, so.
One of the things that might help, just, and I don't know if it ties into this, but we're talking industrial park. I made it a point in December to go out there, and it's a morbid, dead space, grass growing. I had requested Myra consider putting a sign there, and she said she was gonna look into it. you mind looking into, no one knows where it's at. There's no signage, there's no Edinburgh Industrial Park, there's no invitation, we're here open for business. There's no signage, there's no, real estate signs, hey, this is available, owned by the EDC.
Right.
I go around Harlingen, McAllen, Farr, all these places, their EDCs have signs on their properties.
Yep.
And so we've done a very poor job marketing.
Yep.
And Daniel can help us with that. But I invite y'all to go over there. It's an ugly place. I mean,
There's
I
room
wouldn't
for-
look for that if I'm somebody wanting, why would I go there?
Yeah. So in previous employment, I have used signage extensively to market
You have to.
properties. And I plan on doing that here. That's part of the plan.
For the record, I'd like to note that we had Dan Diaz join us at about 6:07. Thank you for being here. So this building program, this industrial building program is just another tool in the tool shed. It's not the only option that is available
No,
for this type of facility.
Right. It's something that, well, first of all, it's not going to impact this year's budget because there's no way that you can do a deal fast enough to make it happen this year. So, again, it's a way for us to market the need for more industrial space and make developers aware that we are playing in their field and we want to recruit them to be part of the team, if you will, to bring in industrial space. And then that gives us more tools to bring in companies. But it does not commit us to anything other than this is something that we can show them. If they want to massage it, if they think that there's something better, then they can come to us with a proposal. And ultimately, that's usually what happens. But you put something out there so that they can pay attention. And that's what we're doing, is trying to get them to pay attention to us.
I like
the
it.
door.
Yeah.
And the marketing that Raul was talking about, so that's separate and apart from this. That would be the marketing of the space that's currently available so that we can at least, or at least the signage out there too.
It is and it isn't, because the developers need to know that there's land available. And we can do a better job, and we will do a better job of making sure that they understand that we have a large 25-acre tract, for example. We do have, in the last few weeks, in the last few months that I've been here, a lot of inquiries for the smaller tracts. And we might consider looking at subdividing some of the larger tracts if the demand calls for it. But you always want to have that big piece because I can tell you that we had 11 state leads in the last 60 days. And I'll read this out real quick. One of them wanted 10 acres. Another one wanted 28 acres. Another one wanted 75 acres. Another one wanted 113,000 square feet of existing space. Another one wanted 75 to 100,000 square feet of existing space. One of them wanted 400,000 to 500,000 square feet. That doesn't exist in the valley except for maybe 1 or 2 buildings. Another one wanted 20 to 40,000 square feet. That one we could probably help. And we did submit information for that one. There was another one that was looking for 20 acres to build 300,000 square feet. So when you ask me how much can you put on 25 acres, about 300, 400,000 square feet. Another one wanted 8,500 square feet of land. I'm sorry, 8,500 acres of land. That's a huge operation. But they are one of those rural type of off-grid type of companies. Then the last two that I got, and they wanted rail along with it, were looking for 100 acres of land. So in the last 60 days, most of the state leads have been for land, but some of them have been for existing buildings. None of them have been, oh, we'll just take the land so that we can build right away. So they're going to build, but these are large chunks of land for the most part because they want to build big spaces. But a lot of these require rail. Some of them wanted to be close to the port. So there's different requirements, and some of them we don't meet. But I just wanted to share that kind of information with y'all because, and if I go back a year, and start looking at what the valley and the entire state has been looking at, most of them have been bigger boxes and large chunks of land. And that's what the companies, when you see announcements from other communities, you look at what those communities did. Well, they provided the opportunity for these companies to come in because they had large land available or large buildings available. Unfortunately, a lot of times those large buildings are because somebody went out of business or somebody moved out. But, you know, at 100,000 square feet, you're not going to put too much at risk. When you start getting into the 500,000 to 1 million square foot boxes, that becomes a different ballgame. And we got to make sure that we have the foundation, which is a lot of the 100,000 square footers and a lot of the base industries to support those larger ones. And we're not there yet, but we can be. So this is a start.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions on the item for the industrial spec building program?
And again, if you want to take a look at it and review it, and we can take action later on, I'm okay with that.
Rodell, I got here late, so I just have a few quick questions. I read the page, it's very interesting. So basically it tells the developer, hey, City of Edinburgh is willing to cut our interest in half if we build in the city. Do you have any sort of numbers what that means? Did we talk about numbers on how big and what kind of commitment that means?
It could be in the six figures on an annual basis, but it's for 2 years.
Oh yeah, but do you have like 100,000 square foot facility will cost?
100,000
EDC?
square feet will cost anywhere between $7 to $10 million, probably.
That's what it would cost the EDC?
No, for the developer to build.
What's the interest that there would be, that the EDC would be responsible for? At
It would
50%?
depend on how much they borrow, and at what interest rate, but
I guess I'm assuming 100% note, financed interest the way they are now. What is our
Say
commitment?
10 million on a
Yeah.
6% interest,
What
you're
is our
looking
commitment,
at.
half the
But
interest
you
on?
can't figure it that way because it keeps increasing as they're borrowing.
Right.
They start borrowing for construction, so
the
1
interest.
month it could be this, and then it's gonna get more expensive, more expensive, more expensive.
as they
Oh, because it's
as they do the
compounded as we're
draws.
pulling out. Right,
Yeah.
you're right.
The
So-
Pine Dam, we did talk, and I don't know if you're.
But, yeah, so-
We have land
Yeah.
that we can use, and they don't have to borrow against it yet.
So typically, nobody's going to get 100% financing. So let's assume a $10 million note, right? They're going to ask at least for 20% equity.
Yeah, 20% down, right, 80%
So that's $2
finance.
million. So you're borrowing $8 million at 6%, that's $48,000. But you're not borrowing it all at the same time.
I got you.
Because you're taking it in draws, right? And so really, it's probably half of that, at least for the first year.
Over the 2 years, or the first year.
Right, in terms of interest. So on $4 million, you know, you're talking about, what? Real quick.
3% on, right?
And then as they start to bring in a tenant, then the amount is reduced pro rata.
Yeah, so on $4 million, you're talking about $250,000 maybe. And so our exposure would be half of that.
Right.
If it's 100% empty. If they have a commitment for 50% of that, then our half would go from 125 to half of the 125, which would be what? 62 or
Right.
62.5.
We
Yeah.
pay that on, with tax incentives, or how do we pay?
You don't have to have anything else. This is the program as it is, but you can combine it if you want to with a reduced
Well,
land
how
cost.
are we writing a check for that amount, or how are we reimbursing the developer?
We're reimbursing the developer after they've shown that they've met all the criteria in the agreement.
So we're writing them a check?
Yep. But they're making a substantial investment and giving us the tools to create a lot of new
Yeah,
jobs.
no, I like it because like I said, on the developer side, like, hey, City of Edinburgh was willing to take half of the interest. So it lessens their liability, right? Right.
So it mitigates their risk, and it shows them that we're aggressive enough to come up with a program that most people aren't willing to do.
Yeah, I like it.
But there will be certain restrictions. Eddie brought up a good point about interest rates too, that, you know, we'd have to have some sort of,
Yeah, don't have them go sign some crazy interest
the interest rate. right?
loan somewhere,
Yeah, 'cause a
right?
lot of these investors and developers, they use hard money loans or, you know, and
Yeah.
the interest rate's 12, 13%, you know, so.
Yeah, it's gotta be a bona fide lender, it's gotta
Right.
be within the market.
Couple points above Fed rate and whatever, yeah.
And the developer's gonna have to be a developer that has the wherewithal to do something like this and not have any issues, but,
Yeah. I'm some guy that came in with 20% interest loan out of God knows where.
Credit card loan.
so we can build all those restrictions into the agreement. And everything has to come before the board and city council for final approval. So this is just basically getting people excited about the possibility of building in Edinburgh.
Yeah,
I like it.
I like it.
And so is this a model from other cities or where,
I created this in Harlingen.
is
But
there a
this
way
is
we?
my baby.
Can we name it EDC something, and anything that we can?
Anything we
I
want.
like it,
It's,
I like it.
There is no copyright anywhere. I mean, I hope that people realize that it's kind of an innovative program, and if they can duplicate it, more power to them.
Right.
But yeah,
So if we approve this today, we still need to figure out language and stuff on what's gonna be the requirements and things, or
yeah,
how's that
that,
gonna work?
that would come in the actual agreement and in the negotiations. This is just, again, a guideline,
To proceed,
more than
okay,
anything.
okay.
It's not specific, because every developer's gonna have a different, project.
Okay.
They may decide that, 100,000 square feet isn't big enough, or they might tell us, hey, you know what, we want a metal building. Well, I'd bring that up to you all and see if you all want to do that. I encourage Class A industrial buildings because those are the investment grade type of facilities. And once you get that kind of synergy going, then you get a whole different type of environment in terms of who's coming in and who's looking at you.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye or raise your
I
right
have a
hand.
Discussion?
Oh,
It's just a
discussion,
small-
sorry.
It's just a small one. Is there a difference between 24 months and 2 years?
no.
Okay. That's one.
You okay?
That's it.
All right, so we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye or raise your right hand. Aye. Motion approved, and that's item E. Item F is another type of recruitment program. This is the commercial recruitment program in your packet. And this is the one that is more in line with what we've been discussing for some time now, that gives us a point system on how to decide, I guess, to be a little bit more transparent and equitable with our incentive program.
Thank you.
So making sure that we don't forget the small business, that's really what this commercial recruitment program's all about. And so, Dan, before you ask, yes, I have done this in the past. This is another one of my babies. What I've looked at is that oftentimes communities are trying to recruit the developers who are building the big shopping centers or the big boxes themselves, and that's great. We can always use those because there's a demand for that type of retailer. What gets left out is the mom and pop that wants to open up a little coffee shop or restaurant or clothing boutique store or a jewelry store or something like that, because they're not big enough to get something. In this program, there's some minimum guidelines in terms of investment and generation of sales to make it worthwhile for the community as well as for the retailer. But just about anybody who can generate at least $250,000 in sales, which means that they're producing sales tax and they create some jobs, even if it's a small number of jobs, and they have a capital investment, they have jobs, and they're selling, they're gonna get something. I had a restaurant in the previous employment that was not making huge sales, but they got $1,500, $1,800 over the different years. That's not a lot of money for a lot of folks, but for that particular business, that's $1,500 they didn't have before, that they put it back into their business. So they got something, because most of the time, Raul's right. they get forgotten. This program gives an opportunity for any business that produces sales tax, produces jobs, and makes an investment to get something back from us, okay? And so here's how it works. The more sales you generate, the more points you get. The more jobs you create, the more points you get. The more capital investment you make, the more points you get. But those are the three foundations. But there's other ways of also earning points. And I'll talk about why we're talking about points in a minute. If you're located in a specific part of town, and on the second page, you can see the location that I was talking about, and we can change these numbers. And again, this is something that I want to put in front of you, and then we can discuss it, and if we need to digest it a little bit and go back, and we can do that too. We have opportunity zones, the federal opportunity zones. If we want businesses to locate in there, we can give them a certain point value. We have a downtown district, if you will. Let's give them a certain point value. We have the University Corridor, which is 107. If you notice that, Trenton and Monte Cristo, because they're well populated and don't need a whole lot of encouragement to locate businesses there, the point value there is less. I've heard City Council talk about our need to focus on the north side and the east side. We've doubled that point value more than all the other locations. So if they're in an opportunity zone on the east side of town, they're getting 30 points, right? Does that make sense? On top of the other points that are in this different graphs. Community involvement is also important. A lot of the small businesses still are participating in the chamber. They're the volunteers for the chamber. They're the volunteers for the Boys and Girls Club. They're the ones who buy the table at the Parks and Rec's annual banquet or something, or at PAWS. And so this gives us an opportunity to give them some points for participating in community type events and community organizations as well. And so when you add it all up, and this is where the third page comes in. So when you add it all up, you look at how many points they earned. And let's assume that a small business didn't rock the boat with the first three categories, and they earned 25 points. Well, they will get, because, for that year, because every year it's reevaluated, for that year, whatever they generated in sales tax, let's assume $10,000 in sales tax, they'll get 12.5% of that back, okay? If the next year they move up to 35 points, then they'll be in a different category and they'll get twice that back. But it's money that they are generating and coming back to us. If they're a very successful franchisee that's rocking the boat and they can score 70 points or higher, and some of them might, then they get 50%. We're never going to give them 100% because the city needs money to operate too, and so do we. But we give them half of what they generate. And in other words, of the 2% that they're bringing back to the community, we give them 1%. And for a certain time period that we decide, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, up to 5 years. But it all depends on that particular company, on the strength of that company. If it's an existing business, they qualify too. But we're only going to look at the increment.
Are you going to be evaluating this on a yearly basis?
On a yearly basis.
Okay.
So they have to provide the information. If they don't provide the information, we don't give them anything.
And it's for new businesses, not existing?
No, it could be for existing businesses that are expanding as well.
Okay.
But they have to be expanding.
And expand.
Because we're going to look at their new jobs created, the increment. We're going to look at the new capital invested, and we're going to look at the new revenues created above their base. And so we'll establish a base and look at that.
Okay.
So, or if it's a second location within the city, then it's a new business.
Location. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just a question, good work. Regardless of where you open, we're open in Edinburgh. They're good, because, I mean, obviously there's some, and I know it's your first jab at it, nice job, but we're open for business regardless of where you open. I know you know, Opportunity Zone, Downtown District, University Corridor, Trenton, and maybe another to capture everything else.
Raul
Because
Longoria or?
Well, I'm just saying, as long as you open.
Yeah.
Open in Edinburgh, please.
Yeah,
And so we shouldn't disqualify anybody, just maybe they can't afford rent these corridors, but they open in wherever that may be.
yeah.
We should be open for
So
everybody.
this is just, this is just a point system, but it's extra
Well,
points
that's
for
why I asked.
being in those specific parts. But I'm not even sure that these are the parts that we want to focus on. I'm going to let you guys sit on this. I didn't want action on this one today.
And you're right
But-
on. Good job.
And so, is there gonna be a map that's gonna show what those particular corridors are, so they'll
Yeah.
know what their region is?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have to create that because that's part of the transparency and accountability that this organization should have. And this is what it does. It creates that accountability. Why did we decide to do this for that particular business? Well, one, they applied. And again, we go back to the guiding principles. They better contact us before they decide to take any action, because if they take action, you know, you've already decided to come to Edinburgh, and so thank you for doing that. And we're gonna help you be successful, but you're not gonna fall into the eligibility for this program.
Well, this is something the mayor should definitely, I guess, advertise at the State of the City perhaps, because we want businesses to expand and we want people to decide to start a business here, but they need to know about it. And it isn't like people are always going to a website necessarily. I mean,
Right.
a lot of times it's more to the word of mouth.
And
They heard
it's
it
a
from a friend that got it.
And for us, it's constantly talking about it, and then if we get participants in it, then they become our ambassadors, if you will, and we put them on video, short clips that we put on social media and keep promoting it so that people understand. And again, it can happen for existing businesses as well, but they gotta be in that growth mode.
Right, okay.
Well, so
Just for my own edification, what is opportunity zones?
Opportunity zones are zones that were created under the previous presidential administration to
Oh, like an
generate.
empowerment zone? Okay, like empowerment zones?
Yeah, it's similar to empowerment zones. They had certain criteria, and most of them had to do with socioeconomic status of most of the residents, and it was based on census tracts. And we had opportunities, we had to nominate the different zones throughout the valley. Some communities took advantage of that, some didn't. But overall, I think the valley did a very good job of identifying those places where investors could get basically some tax-free gains. They could defer some of the capital gains tax based on what they did in those zones. If they invested in those zones and then flip properties, they could get some tax credits as well at the federal level.
Okay.
So this was a federal legislation that got passed several years ago and has continued to expand still under this administration. So-
But I guess the territory that is designated an opportunity zone could change, right?
No, those were set as, at that time, and they don't change those zones.
Oh, they don't?
No.
Okay. All right, because and that's why I think the maps are going to be critical, because people want to know, like, okay, you say opportunity zone, I don't know what that is, so
Yeah.
where exactly? If I want to build in this particular area, where do I fall? You
This
know?
is, again, the point system that we've put here isn't so drastic that they're gonna want to look for that opportunity zone. The people that are looking for opportunity zones, to locate in opportunity zones, have a reason for that, and they're trying to shield some of their gains and trying to reduce their tax liabilities at the federal level. So that's a different type of animal. But for us, this was just a way so that we could say, okay, here's something that's gonna stay stable in terms of a defined area, and something that somebody else has said needs help in revitalization. And so why not give them a few extra points for locating there?
Out of curiosity, where would the Raul Longoria area fall under these?
East side.
Oh, I don't have it there, but I mean, we could always add it, and we can take some of this stuff out. But, I mean, that could be a north-south corridor.
North,
Yeah,
south.
for me, it's more about, I would change like University Corridor to West University, because there's a total difference between East University and West University.
Yeah, that's very true.
Well, we may not want to incentivize extra points for the west side. Because
Or
that's-
very few points, or depending on what's
Yeah.
already saturated
Yeah.
versus,
Or we could do less points for locating on that side versus locating on the east side. So, yeah. Again, this was something that, you know, I know has proven to help the small business owner. And once they get to know it, they want to be a part of it because it's not too cumbersome for them to report this information back to us. They sign a waiver, and then the comptroller's office will give us the information. And then they verify it by giving us copies of their tax returns and whatnot. And then in terms of the number of employees, they give us their Texas Workforce Commission listings and their 941s. So there's easy ways that staff can verify most of this information. It's
And
not-
thank you for putting community involvement in here.
Well, I need your help in identifying some of the other potential NGOs.
Yes. Thank you for doing that.
It looks great. Yeah.
yeah, very
job.
good. Thank you. Okay, well then, let's hold off on that one. Take a look at it, see if you want to, perhaps, if you wanted to provide us in the meantime, Rodell, some maps that showed the corridors, the different corridors, so we could at least get a good sense of what's where, and
Yep.
that
Do
might
that.
help. Especially for us ladies, right, where we just identify things by,
Yes.
by what's where.
West Ware.
Okay, so that was our item F, is that right? Item F.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so our next is executive session, so can I get a motion to move into executive session?
Madam President, I
Oh, yes.
wanted to ask a question on item 5D, if I may. Omar, can I go back and discuss something under Economic Development Incentive Guidelines?
Yeah,
Oh,
can
it's
you-
already done?
No,
Well, it's just a question.
No.
Can-
I
no
don't want to
action on it.
vote on
Can you
it.
just remind me, there was action taken on that item?
there was not.
There was
actually
no
taken.
action taken on that item.
There was no action taken? Okay, so if there's no action, then there's no need to undo what was done. If the chair's okay with taking up a previous item again for discussion,
Which
we
one?
can proceed.
Which one?
5D,
5D was the one that was no action.
correct.
And F.
And you want to take action, or what?
No, I want to discuss something on there.
Oh, okay. I don't even
Your
think we,
permission?
yeah, we can open it up.
Okay.
Right, yeah, so since there's no action, we don't need to undo any action.
Right.
And the chair has the ability to go back to an item at a member's request. So
Okay,
if the
yes,
chair's
let's go
okay with
back.
that, we can go back to the item.
Okay,
Okay,
let's go
Rondell,
back to
under-
5D.
Under that subject, I want to discuss the previous incentive package we had. There was a lot of, I don't remember the exact term, but there was some companies that didn't meet the criteria on the facade development, and we had discussed using the money that existed to help with parking lots. I'd like to make sure we're moving forward with that, or open the discussion so that we can help some of the existing mom-and-pop restaurants and such, that we could somehow incentivize the parking lot restoration that we've talked so much about, but we haven't been discussing it again.
So Dan, actually, I had mentioned that before the meeting, I had mentioned that to Rodell and to Omar, and my understanding was those ARPA funds were going to be used by the city. So I think we need to get some clarification about whether this incentive program is going to be operated by the city or whether it's going to be operated by the EDC. And that's where I think we need to just get speak to the city manager's office as well and get some clarification on how much remains and then who is going to actually administer those monies.
Okay.
Because
Do
you're
we
talking
know?
about from the Spark funds?
Correct. It was the facade, and there was a timeline that businesses had to submit and do the improvements to their building. A lot fell out of the time frame, and there was
400 and something?
800,000.
Oh, is it that much? I thought it was like 400 and
Yeah,
something.
about 800,000 and change left. In discussions, we had talked about helping even businesses who had the facade, who benefit from the facade program, help them with resurfacing of parking lots and such, some sort of.
Lighting, I think.
Correct. And so we haven't been discussing that. So you're saying some of that ARPA money might have gone to city side?
Well, the entirety of the ARPA money is for the city. My understanding is that the city had allocated a certain amount to this specific program, and it was going to be to the EDC to administer the program.
Right.
I don't know the details of what's happened since then, but what the chair said is correct. The best thing to do is probably just to check with the city to make sure that those funds are still available, and if so, do they want the EDC to continue to administer the program?
Okay,
I
and
will-
so, if we do have the funds, could we, everyone in agreement that we at least develop a program for the parking lot? If we have any funds available?
I will look into that.
Thank you.
Yep.
We talked about some specific sites. Program that's already developed. It's just changing names, really.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
have that.
And it may even be a simpler one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to, if I may, there was a line in there of whether they were owners of the building or not. Some folks back then could not address the needs of their building because they were tenants, and we wanted to take that language out. If you're a renter, it's okay if you want to
Yes.
beautify your building.
Yeah, we're just
Because
gonna
this
help
takes
them.
out
in the- yeah.
restaurants, and I know Dan and I are talking to Mr. Tames over there at El Patio. He's a renter. And the program didn't help a renter. It helped the owner. And
Right.
that's a clear distinction.
The owner would have to be the applicant?
Yeah, but the owners don't want to, you
Yeah,
know.
so we want to make sure that they get incentive, that we can help them as well, and just worry about their little piece of
Correct.
I'll look
property.
into that and visit with city manager.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you can, if you do find that they do want the EDC to administer those funds, or that, and if you can put something together that possibly we could examine at the next meeting.
Okay,
Yes.
will do.
Yeah, the shoe shop, we had a lengthy discussion,
Yeah, we've talked about it.
we haven't talked about it again, and I just want to make sure we get something going.
I had just mentioned it to him this afternoon, because I thought, I wonder whatever happened to those funds, yeah.
I would make sure that that's also retroactive, you know, like what we call a look-back period, because there's some people who are doing those kind of improvements right now with their own money, and they would be upset if we come up with a
We don't.
program that doesn't help them, but it helps the other
Right.
guys who waited.
Right,
So
And
we'll,
that's
we'll
all I
look at a
had.
look-back period as well.
thank you, that's all I had. Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so item 6, executive session. Can we get a motion to enter into executive session?
So move. Make the motion.
Okay, motion's been made, seconded. All in favor say aye, or raise your right hand. Okay, motion passes at 6:43, and we're exiting into executive session.